There are moments in life when you realize the people who were supposed to protect you are the very ones who sold you. Not metaphorically. Not in some poetic, tragic sense. But literally. With a contract. With signatures. With a price tag attached to your name. And for her, that moment came on a Tuesday evening in Lagos, in her father's study, surrounded by mahogany furniture and the smell of expensive cigars, when he looked her in the eye and told her she was getting married. To a man she'd never met. In a country she'd never been to. Because he owed a debt he couldn't pay. Her name was Adanna. 26 years old. A tax consultant with her own apartment in Lekki, a master's degree from the University of Lagos, and a future she'd carefully built brick by brick. She wore her natural hair in a crown of coils, spoke 3 languages fluently, and had a laugh that could fill a room. She was not the kind of woman you could just hand over like property. But her father didn't see it that way. He saw an opportunity. A way out. A bargaining chip. And the man on the other side of that bargain? His name was Kang Minho. 34. Korean. Untouchable. The kind of man who walked into rooms and made grown men lower their eyes. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He controlled half the underground trade routes between Seoul and West Africa, laundered money through luxury hotels and art galleries, and had a reputation so sharp it could cut through steel. He was also, by all accounts, devastatingly handsome. The kind of face that belonged on billboards. Sharp jawline. Cold, calculating eyes. Lips that never smiled unless there was something dangerous behind it. But none of that mattered to Adanna. Because she didn't want him. She didn't want any of this. And yet, 3 weeks later, she was standing in the lobby of the Signal Seoul, the most exclusive hotel in South Korea, with 2 suitcases, a one-way ticket, and a ring on her finger she didn't remember agreeing to wear. Her father had called it a merger. A partnership. A solution that benefited everyone. She called it what it was. A sale. And the man who bought her. He was waiting for her on the 78th floor, in a penthouse suite overlooking the Han River, with a glass of whiskey in his hand and absolutely no intention of pretending this was anything other than a transaction. But here's the thing about transactions. Sometimes, the product has a mind of its own. And Adanna. She wasn't about to be anyone's silent investment. The elevator ride to the 78th floor felt like descending into hell, except hell was wrapped in marble, gold accents, and the faint scent of bergamot. Adanna stood perfectly still, her hands gripping the handle of her suitcase so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. She hadn't slept on the plane. Hadn't eaten. Hadn't cried, though God knows she wanted to. Crying felt like surrender. And she wasn't ready to surrender yet. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a private hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. At the end of it, a single door. Black. Sleek. Imposing. She walked toward it slowly, each step echoing in the silence. The door opened before she could knock. And there he was. Kang Minho. Taller than she expected. Dressed in all black tailored trousers, a fitted shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that looked like they belonged to someone who didn't just give orders but enforced them personally. His hair was slicked back, his expression unreadable. He looked at her the way someone might look at a painting they'd purchased but weren't sure they liked yet. "You're late," he said in English. His voice was low, smooth, with just a hint of an accent. "My flight was delayed," Adanna replied, keeping her tone even. He stepped aside without a word, gesturing for her to enter. The penthouse was exactly what she expected. Minimalist. Expensive. Cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering skyline of Seoul. The furniture was sleek and modern, all sharp lines and neutral tones. There were no family photos. No personal touches. Nothing that suggested a human being actually lived here. Minho closed the door behind her and walked past her into the main living area, pouring himself another glass of whiskey from a crystal decanter on the bar. "Your room is down the hall. Second door on the left." Your things will be brought up shortly. He didn't look at her as he spoke. Adanna set her suitcase down. That's it. No welcome. No introduction. No let's pretend this isn't completely insane. He turned then, his dark eyes locking onto hers. What would you like me to say? I don't know. Maybe start with why you agreed to this. Your father owed me money. A significant amount. He offered you as collateral. I accepted. The bluntness of it hit her like a slap. She'd known, of course. But hearing it said out loud, so casually, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. So that's all I am to you? Collateral? For now. He took a sip of his drink. What you become after that depends entirely on you. And what exactly do you expect me to become? He studied her for a long moment, his gaze moving over her face, her posture, the way she held herself like she was ready to fight even though she had nowhere to run. Useful, he said finally. Adanna laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. Useful. Right. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I'm not some obedient little doll you can dress up and parade around. I'm a person. With a life. With a career. With plans that didn't involve being sold to a stranger. Had plans, Minho corrected. Past tense. Excuse me? You had a life. You had a career. You had plans. Now you have this. He gestured vaguely around the room. And me. I didn't agree to this. And yet, here you are. She wanted to scream. To throw something. To demand answers, explanations, something that made this make sense. But she could see it in his eyes. He didn't care. Not about her feelings. Not about her anger. He'd made a deal, and as far as he was concerned, the deal was done. Fine, she said quietly. But don't expect me to play the role of the grateful wife. I'll stay because I don't have a choice. But that's all you're getting from me. Compliance. Nothing more. Minho's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, though there was no warmth in it. We'll see. He set his glass down and walked past her toward the hallway. Dinner is at 8. Don't be late. And just like that, he was gone, leaving her standing alone in the middle of a penthouse that felt more like a prison than a home. Adanna exhaled slowly, her hands trembling. She didn't know what kind of man Kang Minho was. Not yet. But she was about to find out. And something told her it was going to be a very long, very complicated road ahead. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a space so pristine it looked like it had never been used. The table was long, black lacquered wood, set for two at opposite ends. Crystal glasses. White porcelain plates. A single candle flickering in the center, though the overhead lighting was bright enough to perform surgery. Adanna sat at one end, Minho at the other. Between them, 6 feet of polished silence. The food was brought in by a woman in her 50s, dressed in a crisp uniform, who set the plates down without making eye contact and disappeared as quickly as she'd come. Some kind of grilled fish, roasted vegetables, rice. It looked expensive. It probably was. Adanna picked up her fork and took a bite. It was good. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of saying so. You don't like Korean food? Minho asked from the other end of the table. I like food, she replied. I'm just not used to eating in a mausoleum. He didn't react. Just continued cutting his fish with surgical precision. You'll get used to it. Will I? Most people do. I'm not most people. He looked up then, his gaze steady. No. You're not. There was something in the way he said it that made her pause. Not a compliment, exactly. More like an observation. A fact he was filing away for later use. Tell me something, Adanna said, setting her fork down. Do you do this often? By women? No. So I'm special. You're convenient. Right. Convenient. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. And what happens when I'm no longer convenient? Then we renegotiate. And if I refuse to negotiate? Then you stay anyway. She laughed again, that same bitter sound. You really think you can just keep me here? Like a prisoner? I don't think anything. I know. He set his knife and fork down, his eyes never leaving hers. Your passport is in my safe. Your father signed over legal guardianship to me as part of the contract. You have no money, no connections, no way to leave this country without my permission. So yes, Adanna. I can keep you here. And I will. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. He wasn't threatening her. He was stating facts. And the worst part? He was right. She had nothing. No leverage. No escape route. She was completely, utterly trapped. But she'd be damned if she let him see her break. Fine, she said, her voice steady. Then I guess we're stuck with each other. It would seem so. But let me make one thing clear. She leaned forward, her dark eyes locking onto his. You can control where I go. You can control what I do. But you will never, ever control who I am. I will not be your puppet. I will not be your decoration. And I will not pretend to love you just because you paid for me. For the first time since she'd arrived, something shifted in his expression. Not anger. Not amusement. Something else. Something she couldn't quite name. I don't want your love, he said quietly. Then what do you want? He stood, picking up his glass and walking toward the window, his back to her. I want you to survive. The words hung in the air between them, strange and heavy. Adanna frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He didn't answer. Just stared out at the city below, his reflection ghostly in the glass. And for the first time since she'd met him, Adanna wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was more to Kang Minho than the cold, calculating monster she'd assumed he was. But that thought was dangerous. Because if he was human, that meant he could hurt her in ways she wasn't prepared for. And she couldn't afford to let that happen. Not now. Not ever. The days that followed were strange. Adanna quickly learned the rhythm of Minho's world, a world built on silence, routine, and unspoken rules. He left early in the mornings, always dressed in tailored suits, always smelling faintly of cedarwood and something darker, something she couldn't quite place. He returned late, sometimes after midnight, his expression carefully blank, his movements controlled. They didn't speak much. Breakfast was solitary. Dinner was formal and brief. The penthouse felt less like a home and more like a luxury hotel where two strangers happened to be staying in adjacent rooms. But Adanna wasn't idle. She explored every inch of the penthouse when he was gone, memorizing exits, testing doors, searching for weaknesses in the fortress he'd built around her. She found none. Every window was locked. Every door required a keycard she didn't have. Even the elevator needed a code. She was a bird in a gilded cage, and the cage was expertly designed. On the fourth day, she found the library. It was tucked away behind a sliding panel in the hallway, a small room lined with bookshelves. Most of the books were in Korean, but there were a few in English. Business books. Philosophy. Some classic literature. And tucked in the corner, almost hidden, a collection of poetry. She pulled one out. Rainer Maria Rilke. The pages were worn, the spine cracked from use. Someone had read this book many times. You found it. Adanna jumped, spinning around. Minho stood in the doorway, still in his suit, his tie loosened. He looked tired. More tired than she'd seen him. I didn't hear you come in, she said. I know. He stepped into the room, his eyes moving to the book in her hands. Do you read poetry? Sometimes. That one's good. You've read it. Many times. She looked at him, really looked at him, trying to reconcile the man who read Rilke with the man who bought women like commodities. Why do you have a library if you're never here? She asked. I'm here more than you think. Are you? He didn't answer. Just moved to the window, looking out at the Seoul skyline the way he always did, like he was searching for something he couldn't find. Can I ask you a question? Adanna said. You can ask. Why did you really agree to this? And don't tell me it's just about money. Men like you don't need collateral. You could have taken everything my father had and still had more than enough. So why me? Why a wife? Minho was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. In my world, weakness is death. The moment people think you're vulnerable, they come for you. They test you. They try to take what's yours. And a wife makes you look less vulnerable. A wife makes me look stable, settled, less likely to make reckless decisions. It's armor. Adanna let that sink in. So I'm armor. Yes. That's it. That's all this is. He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't cold. It was something raw. Something human. That's all it can be. Why? Because anything else would be dangerous. For both of us. The air between them felt charged, electric. Adanna's heart was beating faster than it should have been, and she didn't know why. I should let you rest, Minho said, breaking the moment. He moved toward the door. Wait. He paused, not turning around. Thank you, Adanna said quietly. For the library. It's nice. He didn't respond. Just nodded once and left, closing the door softly behind him. Adanna stood there for a long time, the book of poetry still in her hands, her mind racing. Kang Minho was not what she expected. And that terrified her more than anything else. Because she was starting to realize that the most dangerous thing about him wasn't his power or his reputation or the fact that he owned her on paper. It was the possibility that somewhere beneath all that ice, there was a person she might actually care about. And caring about someone who owned you, that was a prison far worse than any penthouse could ever be. 2 weeks into her new life, Adanna was summoned. Not by Minho directly, but by the woman who managed the household, a stern-faced Korean woman named Mrs. Kang, no relation, who spoke limited English but communicated perfectly well through sharp looks and efficient gestures. You go, Mrs. Kang said, handing Adanna a garment bag. Tonight. Event. You wear this. Adanna unzipped the bag and pulled out a dress that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe back in Lagos. Midnight blue silk, floor-length, with a high slit and delicate beading along the neckline. It was stunning. It was also clearly chosen by someone who knew exactly what message they wanted to send. What kind of event? Adanna asked. Mrs. Kang just pointed at the clock. 6 o'clock. Be ready. And that was that. At precisely 6 o'clock, Adanna emerged from her room in the blue dress, her hair swept up into an elegant bun, makeup subtle but striking. She felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Minho was waiting in the living room, and when he turned to look at her, something flickered across his face. Just for a second. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual mask of indifference. You clean up well, he said. You're welcome, Adanna replied dryly. He was wearing a tuxedo, black, perfectly tailored, making him look even more untouchable than usual. If possible. Where are we going? She asked. A gala. Business associates. You don't need to say much. Just smile. Look elegant. Let people see you. So I'm a prop. You're my wife. Same thing, apparently. He handed her a small velvet box. She opened it to find a necklace, diamonds and sapphires arranged in an intricate pattern that probably cost more than a small car. I can't wear this, she said. You can. You will. He took it from her hands and stepped behind her, fastening it around her neck. His fingers brushed against her skin, and she shivered despite herself. There, he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. Perfect. Adanna looked at herself in the mirror across the room. The woman staring back at her looked like someone else. Someone powerful. Someone who belonged in this world. But inside, she still felt like the girl who'd been sold. The gala was held at one of Seoul's most exclusive hotels, a sprawling marble palace filled with Korea's elite. Politicians. Business tycoons. Entertainment moguls. Everyone dressed in their finest, everyone wearing their carefully constructed masks. Minho moved through the crowd like a shark through water, smooth, confident, dangerous. People parted for him automatically. Men bowed slightly. Women watched him with barely concealed interest. And Adanna. She was the mystery on his arm. The unexpected addition to the Kang Minho narrative. She could feel the stares. Hear the whispers. See the questions in their eyes. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why her? Minho seemed unbothered. He introduced her to various people always the same way. This is my wife, Adanna. No explanations. No elaborations. Just a fact, presented as simply as the weather. Some people were polite. Others were barely able to hide their shock. One woman, dripping in diamonds and disdain, actually looked Adanna up and down before asking Minho in Korean something that made his jaw tighten. He responded in Korean, his tone cold enough to freeze fire. The woman paled and excused herself quickly. What did she say? Adanna asked quietly. Nothing important. Minho. He looked at her, something dangerous in his eyes. She asked if I'd gone shopping in Africa. I told her she should be careful asking questions when she has so many secrets of her own. Adanna felt a strange warmth in her chest. He'd defended her. Not because he cared, probably, but because she was his, and in his world, that meant something. They made their way to their table, where several other couples were already seated. The conversation was in Korean, fast and fluid, and Adanna found herself zoning out, watching the room instead. Until someone addressed her directly in English. So, Adanna, is it? How did you and Minho meet? The question came from a man in his 40s, handsome in a polished way, with sharp eyes that reminded her of a predator assessing prey. Adanna glanced at Minho, who was watching her with that unreadable expression. Through family, she said carefully. It was arranged. Arranged? The man raised an eyebrow. How traditional. I didn't think Minho was the type. I'm full of surprises, Minho said smoothly. Clearly. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. And do you plan to stay in Seoul, Adanna? Or is this just a temporary arrangement? There was something pointed in the question. Something that suggested he knew more than he was letting on. I haven't decided yet, Adanna replied, matching his smile with one of her own. I'm still exploring my options. Minho's hand found hers under the table, his grip firm. A warning or a reassurance, she couldn't tell. The man laughed. Well, I hope you choose wisely. Seoul can be unforgiving to those who don't belong. Good thing I'm tougher than I look, Adanna said sweetly. The man's smile faltered, just slightly. Minho's grip on her hand tightened, and when she glanced at him, she could have sworn she saw the ghost of approval in his eyes. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of small talk and careful navigation. By the time they left, Adanna's feet were killing her and her face hurt from fake smiling. In the car ride back, she kicked off her heels and sighed. That was exhausting. You did well, Minho said. Did I? Better than I expected. Should I be flattered or insulted? Both, probably. She laughed, a real laugh this time, and he glanced at her, something soft flickering across his face before it disappeared. That man, Adanna said. The one who asked about me. He knows something, doesn't he? Park Jin-soo. His arrival. He's trying to figure out if you're a weakness he can exploit. Am I? Minho was quiet for a long moment. I don't know yet. It wasn't the answer she expected. But it was honest. And somehow, that mattered more than any lie would have. Life settled into a strange new pattern. Adanna was still a prisoner, technically. Still bound by circumstance and paperwork and a debt that wasn't hers. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. Minho started coming home earlier. Not always, but more often than before. They'd have dinner together, still formal, but less rigid. Sometimes they'd talk. About small things. Safe things. Books. Cities. Differences between Nigeria and Korea. He never asked about her family, and she never volunteered. That wound was still too fresh. But she learned things about him. Little details that slipped through the cracks of his carefully maintained armor. He hated mornings but functioned perfectly on 3 hours of sleep. He took his coffee black, no sugar. He had a scar on his left shoulder blade that he never explained. He played piano, though she'd never heard him, only found the sheet music tucked away in a drawer. He was methodical, controlled, precise in everything he did. Except when he looked at her. When he looked at her, something in his eyes was just slightly out of focus, like he couldn't quite figure her out, and it bothered him more than he wanted to admit. One evening, about a month into her stay, Adanna found herself in the kitchen, a space she'd mostly avoided because Mrs. Kang ran it like a military operation. But Mrs. Kang had the evening off, and Adanna was craving something that tasted like home. She'd managed to find a small African grocery store online that delivered, and now she had everything she needed to make jollof rice. She was chopping onions when Minho walked in, still in his work clothes but with his tie already removed. "What are you doing?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "Cooking. We have staff for that." "I know. But I wanted to do it myself." She glanced at him. "Have you ever had jollof rice?" "No." "Then you're about to." He watched her for a moment, then did something completely unexpected. He rolled up his sleeves and washed his hands. "What are you doing?" Adanna asked. "Helping." "You cook?" "No. But I can follow instructions." She couldn't help but smile. "Okay. Then start by dicing those tomatoes." They worked in comfortable silence, the kitchen filling with the smell of spices and simmering rice. It was domestic. Normal. Strange. When the food was finally ready, they ate at the kitchen island instead of the formal dining room. Adanna watched nervously as Minho took his first bite. His eyes widened slightly. "This is good. You sound surprised." "I am." "Gee, thanks. I mean it. This is excellent." He took another bite, and Adanna felt an absurd swell of pride. "My mother taught me," she said quietly. "Before she died." Minho paused, setting down his fork. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." "That doesn't make it easier." "No. It didn't." They finished the meal in silence, but it was a different kind of silence. Less empty. More full. After dinner, Minho poured 2 glasses of wine and led her to the balcony, a space she hadn't spent much time on because the height made her dizzy. But tonight, with the city spread out below them like a sea of lights, it felt less terrifying and more beautiful. "Can I ask you something?" Adanna said, leaning against the railing. "You can ask. Do you regret it? Marrying me?" Minho was quiet for a long time, swirling the wine in his glass. "I don't regret things," he said finally. "Regret is useless. You make a decision and you live with it." "That's not an answer." "No," he admitted. "It's not." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell that familiar cedarwood scent. "I don't regret you," he said quietly. "I regret the circumstances. I regret that you were put in a position where you had no choice." "But you, Adanna?" "No. I don't regret you." Her breath caught. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you deserve to know." "And what do I do with that information?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and there was something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Something vulnerable. Something real. "Whatever you want," he said. They stood there for a long moment, the city humming below them, the night air cool against their skin. And then, without thinking, without planning, Adanna reached out and took his hand. He didn't pull away. He didn't say anything. He just held on. And for the first time since she'd arrived in Seoul, Adanna felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone. Everything changed on a Thursday. Adanna woke to the sound of raised voices, something that never happened in the carefully controlled silence of the penthouse. She pulled on a robe and hurried into the living room to find Minho in a heated argument with two men in dark suits. The conversation was entirely in Korean, sharp and fast, and Minho's expression was darker than she'd ever seen it. One of the men noticed her and said something that made Minho's jaw clench. "Go back to your room," Minho said in English, his voice tight. "What's going on?" "Adanna. Room. Now." The command in his voice left no room for argument. She retreated to her room but pressed her ear against the door, trying to make sense of the muffled conversation. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the voices stopped. She heard the front door open and close. Silence. She waited a few minutes, then carefully opened her door. Minho was standing at the window, his back to her, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Minho, I told you to stay in your room. I know. But there's been a complication." He turned to face her, and she was startled by the exhaustion in his eyes. "Park Jin-soo. The man from the gala. He's making a move. He knows about your father. About the debt. About our arrangement." "What does that mean?" "It means you're a target now. He thinks if he can get to you, he can get to me." Fear prickled at the base of her spine. "Can he?" Minho crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders, his eyes intense. "I won't let anything happen to you. Do you understand? You're under my protection. That means something in this world. But what if? No." His grip tightened. "No, what ifs? You stay close. You don't go anywhere without security. You don't talk to anyone I haven't cleared. This isn't negotiable. So I'm a prisoner again. You're alive. And you're going to stay that way." There was something fierce in his voice, something possessive and protective and entirely too complicated. "Why do you care?" Adanna asked quietly. "I'm just collateral, remember?" His hands slid from her shoulders to cup her face, tilting it up so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "You stopped being just collateral the moment you walked into this penthouse," he said roughly. "You stopped being just collateral when you argued with me at dinner. When you made me laugh. When you cooked jollof rice in my kitchen and made it feel like a home instead of a museum." Her heart was racing. "Minho. I know this wasn't what either of us wanted. I know you hate me for what I did. What your father did. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about a debt and started being about something I don't know how to name. And I'll be damned if I let anyone hurt you because of it." Adanna stared at him, her world tilting on its axis. This man. This cold, calculating, dangerous man. He was unraveling in front of her. And God help her, she wanted to catch him. "I don't hate you," she whispered. His thumb brushed across her cheek. "You should. I know." "Adanna." She didn't let him finish. She kissed him. It was impulsive, reckless, probably the worst decision she'd made in a long line of bad decisions. But she didn't care. For a heartbeat, Minho froze. Then he was kissing her back, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her close, like if he didn't hold on tight enough she'd disappear. The kiss was desperate, messy, nothing like the controlled man she'd come to know. It was raw and real and terrifying and perfect all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Minho rested his forehead against hers. "This is a bad idea," he murmured. "Terrible," she agreed. "We shouldn't." "Probably not." "Adanna." "Shut up, Minho." And she kissed him again. Because maybe they were both broken. Maybe this was doomed from the start. Maybe in 6 months or a year, they'd look back and wonder what the hell they were thinking. But right now, in this moment, she didn't care. Right now, she wanted this. Wanted him. And for the first time since her father had sold her like property, she was making a choice. A real choice. And it terrified her how right it felt. The next few days existed in a strange limbo. Minho increased security to a ridiculous degree, bodyguards everywhere, cameras, tracking systems. Adanna couldn't so much as go to the lobby without an armed escort. But inside the penthouse, something had shifted. They didn't talk about the kiss. Didn't acknowledge it directly. But it hung between them like a living thing, changing the air, changing the way they moved around each other. Minho was gentler. Still controlled, still careful, but there were moments a hand on the small of her back as he passed, his fingers lingering a second too long. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, like he was trying to memorize every detail. Adanna found herself doing the same. Noticing things she'd missed before. The way his jaw tensed when he was stressed. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The fact that he always checked the locks twice before bed, a habit born from years of looking over his shoulder. They were circling each other, two people trying to figure out how to exist in a space that was neither prison nor home, neither transaction nor love, but something undefined in between. And then Park Jin-soo made his move. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. Adanna was in the library, reading, when her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Your husband isn't who you think he is. If you want the truth, meet me at the Lotte World Tower observation deck. 4 p.m. Come alone. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It was obviously a trap. Obviously. She wasn't stupid. But the words gnawed at her. Your husband isn't who you think he is. What did that mean? She thought about telling Minho. Should have told Minho. But some reckless part of her, the part that was tired of being protected and controlled and kept in the dark, wanted answers. So at 3:30, she told her security detail she was taking a nap and locked her bedroom door. Then she slipped out through the service entrance she'd discovered weeks ago, a blind spot in Minho's otherwise perfect system. By 4 p.m., she was standing on the observation deck of Lotte World Tower, 500 meters above Seoul, her heart in her throat. Park Jin-soo was waiting. Mrs. Kang, he said with a smile that made her skin crawl. I wasn't sure you'd come. What do you want? To help you. I doubt that. He laughed. Smart. Good. You'll need that. He pulled out a tablet and handed it to her. Do you know what your husband does? Really does. He's a businessman. He's a criminal. And not just any criminal. He runs one of the largest trafficking operations between Korea and West Africa. Drugs. Weapons. People. He swiped through images on the tablet, documents, photos, shipping manifests. Your father didn't just owe him money. Your father worked for him. And when your father tried to skim off the top, Minho decided to take something your father valued instead. You. Adanna's blood ran cold. You're lying. Am I? Ask him. Ask him about the shipment that left Lagos 3 weeks before you arrived. Ask him about the girls who were on that shipment. Girls your age. Younger. No. No, this couldn't be real. Why are you telling me this? Because I need leverage. And you, my dear, are very good leverage. He stepped closer. Come with me. Now. Willingly. And I promise I'll get you out of Korea safely. Stay with him, and you'll be complicit in everything he does. Is that the life you want? Adanna's mind was spinning. She didn't know what to believe. Didn't know what was real. But she knew one thing. She knew Park Jin-soo was dangerous. I need time to think. You don't have time. His men probably already know you're here. In about 5 minutes, this place will be swarming with. He was cut off by the sound of the elevator doors opening. Minho stepped out, flanked by 4 men in black. His expression was terrifying. Controlled fury wrapped in ice. Step away from her, Minho said quietly. Park Jin-soo smiled. Or what? You'll kill me. In front of her? Show her exactly what you are. If necessary. Minho, Adanna started, but he held up a hand. Get behind me, Adanna. No. Not until you tell me the truth. What he said about the trafficking, about my father, is it true? Minho's jaw clenched. It's more complicated than. Is it true? A long, terrible silence. Yes. The word hit her like a physical blow. Park Jin-soo laughed. There it is. The truth. Your hero is a monster, Mrs. Kang. But Adanna wasn't looking at Park anymore. She was looking at Minho, at the man she'd started to care for, the man she'd kissed, the man who'd held her like she mattered. Tell me everything, she said. Right now. Or I walk out of here with him. Minho's eyes flashed. You're not going anywhere with him. Then talk. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something break behind his eyes. Some final wall crumbling. Your father worked in my logistics chain. He was good at it. Reliable. Until he got greedy and started siphoning money. The debt was real. But you're right, I didn't need you as collateral. I could have taken everything. I could have killed him. Then why? Because when I went to collect, I saw you. And I knew if I left you there, someone else would come. Someone worse. Someone who would use you and break you and throw you away. So I gave your father a choice. Work off the debt, or give me you. He chose you. Adanna felt like she was going to be sick. So you saved me? Is that the story you're telling yourself? I took you out of a bad situation and put you in a different one. Is it better? I don't know. But you're alive. You're safe. And no one will ever hurt you as long as I'm breathing. Except you already did. You lied. You made me think. Her voice broke. I was starting to trust you. I know. His voice was rough, raw. I know, and I'm sorry. But everything I said on the balcony was true. You matter. You matter more than you should. Park Jin-soo was watching all this with obvious enjoyment. How touching. But it doesn't change what he is. What he's done. Come with me, Adanna. Before he drags you down with him. Adanna looked between the two men. One who'd lied to her, used her, but also protected her. One who was offering freedom but reeked of manipulation. Two cages. Different locks. I'm not going with you, she said to Park. He raised an eyebrow. No. No. Because you're worse than he is. At least Minho never pretended to be anything other than what he is. You're selling me a fantasy. Park's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. She walked toward Minho, her legs shaking but her head held high. Minho's eyes never left Park. Leave. Now. Before I change my mind about letting you walk out of here. This isn't over, Park said. Yes, it is. Park looked at Adanna one last time, then smiled coldly. Good luck, Mrs. Kang. You're going to need it. And he left. As soon as the elevator doors closed, Minho's composure cracked. He pulled Adanna into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Don't ever do that again, he said, his voice shaking. Don't ever put yourself in danger like that again. You lied to me. I know. You should have told me. I know. I don't know if I can forgive you. I know. She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. But I also don't know if I can leave you. What does that make me? Human, he said softly. It makes you human. And there, 500 meters above Seoul, surrounded by Minho's security and the ghost of choices neither of them could take back, Adanna made a decision. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to pretend this was simple. She was going to stay. She was going to fight. She was going to drag them both, kicking and screaming if necessary, into something that looked less like a transaction and more like a life. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be clean. But it would be theirs. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The weeks following the confrontation with Park Jin-soo were the hardest of Adanna's life. Not because Minho was cruel, he wasn't. Not because she was trapped, she'd always been that. But because now she knew the truth, and the truth was messy and complicated and refused to fit into neat boxes of good and evil. Minho didn't try to justify himself. Didn't make excuses. He simply existed in the space between monster and man, and left it to her to decide which one she saw. They talked. God, how they talked. Late into the night, brutal conversations where nothing was off limits. He told her about his childhood, growing up in the slums of Seoul, watching his mother work herself to death, learning early that the world didn't care about people like them. He told her about his first kill, the way it had felt like crossing a line he could never uncross. He told her about the empire he'd built, brick by bloody brick, and the cost of keeping it standing. And Adanna. She told him about Lagos. About growing up with a father who saw her as an investment rather than a daughter. About her mother's death and the way it had hollowed out her family, leaving nothing but money and resentment. About the career she'd built just to prove she could exist separate from her father's shadow. They laid themselves bare, two people trying to figure out if honesty could be a foundation or just another weapon. Slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild. Minho started teaching her things: how to navigate Seoul, how to read the subtle power dynamics in his world, how to protect herself if things went wrong. He gave her access to his accounts, his properties, his life. Not because she asked, but because he wanted her to know she had options. If you want to leave, he told her one night, I won't stop you. I'll give you money, a new identity, anything you need. But if you stay, it has to be because you want to. Not because you're trapped. And if I stay, she asked, what does that make us? I don't know. But I'd like to find out. So she stayed. Not because she forgave him. Not because she forgot. But because somewhere in the twisted wreckage of their beginning, she'd found something worth fighting for. She started taking Korean lessons. Started learning the language, the culture, the unspoken rules of the world she'd been dropped into. She attended more events with Minho, but this time, she wasn't just arm candy. She was a presence. She spoke up. Asked questions. Made connections. People started talking about her differently. Not as Kang Minho's mysterious wife, but as a person in her own right. And Minho? He was changing too. Becoming less guarded around her. Smiling more. Laughing, even, at her jokes and observations about Korean culture. One evening, she found him at the piano, the one she'd known existed but never heard played. He was playing something soft and melancholy, his fingers moving across the keys with surprising grace. She sat down beside him on the bench, not saying anything. He glanced at her, then continued playing. My mother taught me. Before she died. It's beautiful. She was the only person who ever believed I could be something other than what I am. Adanna leaned her head on his shoulder. Maybe you still can be. I've done things, Adanna. Things I can't take back. Things that would horrify you if you knew the details. I know. But people aren't just one thing. You can be the man who's done terrible things and also the man who reads Rilke and plays piano and makes me feel safe. Both things can be true. He stopped playing, turning to look at her. How are you so wise? I'm not. I'm just trying to survive. Same as you. He kissed her then, soft and slow, like he was afraid she might break. Or maybe like he was afraid he might. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you. I know I have no right to say that. I know it doesn't change anything. But I need you to know. Adanna's breath caught. Minho. You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. She pulled back to look at him, her heart hammering. I'm not ready to say it yet. But I'm not saying it either. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense. Good. Because I think I might be falling for you, and it's terrifying, and I need you to be patient with me. I can do patient. She laughed. No, you can't. But I appreciate the lie. He smiled, and it was real and warm and nothing like the cold mask he showed the world. And in that moment, Adanna realized something. She wasn't in a cage anymore. She was in a partnership. Messy, complicated, built on shaky ground. But a partnership nonetheless. And she was going to fight like hell to make it work. 3 months later, Adanna stood in the same library where this had all begun, looking at the same Rilke poetry book. But everything was different now. The penthouse felt like home. Seoul felt like home. The language was starting to come easier. The people in Minho's world had stopped seeing her as an outsider and started seeing her as his equal. And Minho? He'd started dismantling the parts of his empire that dealt in human suffering. It was slow, dangerous work. You couldn't just walk away from that world without consequences. But he was trying. For her. For himself. For the possibility of being something better. She heard him come in behind her, felt his arms wrap around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How strange life is. 6 months ago, I wanted nothing more than to escape you. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. Regrets? Oh, about 1,000. But not about this. Not about us." He kissed the top of her head. "I have something for you." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a passport. Nigerian. In her name. Valid. "I had it made," he said quietly. "You're not a prisoner anymore, Adanna. You never should have been. If you want to go back to Lagos, visit your friends, build a career there, I'll support it. If you want to stay here, I'll support that too. But the choice is yours. It's always been yours." Adanna stared at the passport, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you. I should have done it sooner. You did it now. That's what matters." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I love you. I should have said it before, but I was scared. I'm still scared, honestly. But I love you. All of you. Even the parts that scare me." Minho's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Say it again. I love you, Kang Minho. Again. I love you. One more time. You're ridiculous. And yet you love me. Unfortunately." He laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. They stood there in the library, holding each other, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and somehow made it work anyway. Outside, Seoul glittered. Inside, home felt solid for the first time in Adanna's life. Was it perfect? No. Would there be more challenges? Absolutely. Minho's world was dangerous, and they both knew it. There would be threats, complications, moments when they'd question everything. But they'd face it together. Not as owner and possession. Not as captor and prisoner. But as partners. As equals. As two people who'd chosen each other, again and again, despite everything. And in the end, that choice was the only thing that mattered. If this story touched something in you, if you felt Adanna's strength, Minho's transformation, or the raw, complicated beauty of two people building love from broken pieces, I'd love to know. Drop a comment below telling me your favorite moment, or what you'd do in Adanna's shoes. Would you have stayed? Would you have run? Let's talk about it. And if you're craving more stories like this, stories about unlikely love, powerful connections across cultures, and characters who refuse to be anything less than extraordinary, hit that subscribe button. Because here on this channel, we're building a community that believes love doesn't have to be simple to be real. It just has to be fought for. So subscribe, turn on those notifications, and get ready. Because Adanna and Minho's story? This is just the beginning. There's so much more to tell, the battles they'll face, the enemies who won't accept their happiness, and the moments that will test everything they've built. You won't want to miss what comes next. See you in the next story. And until then, remember that sometimes, the most beautiful things are born from the most broken beginnings. You just have to be brave enough to stay.